We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. We are continuing our long-form conversation with longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation senior political analyst, Tim Donner. Thanks for sticking around, Tim. So I want to move the conversation to what's happening with Donald Trump. And there's something that it's really becoming apparent to me now. And it's something that I have been writing about and talking about for some weeks now, that the areas that a lot of people on the left are criticizing Donald Trump for, they're all long game situations. So deporting illegal migrants. We thought actually stopping the flow of people across the border was a long-term issue to deal with, but apparently it turns out that was just political will that was needed, and they dropped straight away. But tariffs in particular, and now things seem to be coming together. So deportations are going ahead. The tariffs that so many people were worried about, and the stock market in particular was worried about, now that there's trade deals happening, the market's pretty much back to where it was.
Yes.
Increasing. And these things seem to be playing out pretty much as Donald Trump presumably predicted they would. And I'm wondering, just to kick this conversation off, Tim, is if there were not such negative obstructionism, would these things have happened sooner or more effectively?
I don't think so, because the tariffs were something that incited skepticism in most circles, including conservative circles.
Yeah.
Free market economists have never been a fan of tariffs. And of course, it had a short-term effect on the market in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the costs. Didn't really see a big difference in the cost of living, but it certainly would have if it continued the way it did. It's actually, I think that things have turned Trump's way faster than I thought, but I did predict that, that the market, which panicked, it always panics at the slightest drop of a pin, that the market would head northward as soon as there was a first trade deal. And it had a modest recovery when the US-UK trade deal was announced. And now with the China deal all but done, not only is the market responding and returning to where it was before the whole Liberation Day announcement, but I think it's going to accelerate, because now countries don't want to be left behind in the Trump tariff regime.
Yeah.
You have UK in line. You have China pretty much in line. We've been told that a trade deal with India is pretty close. That could possibly be delayed because of their skirmishes with Pakistan. But, there's almost more than 100 other countries standing in line waiting to make a trade deal. So I think every time you get a new trade deal, the market is going to rise. And I'm no financial expert. I don't know the stock market as well as some people do, but I would suspect that it's probably a pretty good time to invest, because you're only going to see more and more trade deals now. As Donald Trump Jr. said when Liberation Day tariffs were announced, he said, if I were another country, I'd get in line now to make a deal, because if you're the last one in or late in the game, you're not going to get as good a deal, because Trump will have that much more leverage over the entire process.
Absolutely right. There's something that goes hand in hand with that, and I'm just pulling up here, so I've got the figures. So there was a Neapolitan news service poll that came out recently, and it was less than half of Americans realize that faster economic growth actually reduces the federal budget deficit. And I think it was like just 45% of people realize that. And so when Trump says that he's he's going to bring down the deficit, and presumably pay off some debt to boot along the lines. Not everybody seems to it's like less than half of people realize that you get to that through blossoming your economy, which
Well, that was
is a
something that
bit staggering, right?
Ronald Reagan sort of introduced
Yeah,
the concept that when you lower taxes, you actually bring in more
yeah,
revenue, which seems counterintuitive. But the fact is, when you lower taxes, okay, people will have more money to spend. Corporations can hire more people who in turn pay taxes, and the revenues to the government actually go up to a certain point. There's an
yeah.
old thing called the
The
Laffer
Laffer curve,
curve,
yeah, yeah,
which basically said there's a point beyond which you don't want to go in lowering taxes at the cost of federal revenue. But there is a sweet spot
yeah,
in there. And Trump understands that. He understands that, with all the jobs that are going to be created through this tariff regime, more people will be employed. And therefore, more taxes will be raised. And
yeah.
all I can say, Mark, is I can't wait for the day when we turn on that debt clock that keeps
Mm.
turning over millions of dollars every single day and seeing it either stalled or going in reverse. That's when I think we can believe that we're making a serious dent in what is, even though most people don't think about it or aware of it, a catastrophic national
Yeah.
debt, which has to be reversed at some point, or else we'll have no money at the federal level for anything but interest payments and defense.
Yeah, yeah, it's the albatross, isn't it? It's the
It is.
albatross tied around the neck as it would be the albatross tied around the necks of grandchildren for the grandfather's ills in the federal spending. So you have this situation where it appears that things have actually moved at a somewhat faster pace than you or I anticipated. How important is it that each of these particular ventures that President Trump is trying come to full fruition before the midterms really heat up?
Well, I think this is why the president announced so early in his term the whole tariff regime,
Mm,
Liberation Day, because he knew it would need time to crystallize, and be cemented into place. And so he did it about, 20 months before the midterms.
yeah.
And frankly, if his strategy is unsuccessful by that time or hasn't reached fruition by that time, it never will. But I think we're seeing already that it's a matter of the degree of
Mm,
success rather than whether he'll be successful or not. I think a big question is what kind of revenue gains we can enjoy, experience once the smoke clears and the dust settles in all these negotiations. Because I think one thing people don't realize is that these trade deals are very complicated.
yeah.
They ordinarily take months and months to negotiate because there's so many. It's not just a matter of saying, here's a tariff, here's your tariff, here's my
Mm,
tariff. There's so many other non-tariff related issues that have to be worked out precisely between countries. And so actually, you could say the UK-US trade accord was actually put in place pretty quickly. And now we have China, which I think with China, what Trump has done is he has played the art of the deal perfectly because China was really suffering. People were losing their jobs. Uh, Ports were full of ships with merchandise they couldn't ship out. And,
mm.
for an export economy, China could
Yeah.
hardly afford for this to go on for long. So,
Sorry, Tim, that really is something worth pointing out. So there were no ships coming in to the US, or fewer ships coming into the US, and a lot of I don't want to say chicken littlers because, there's some very serious concerns with, what's happening with the economy for American livelihoods. But there are a lot of people worried that, well, this is going to hurt us more. But it's really not that situation because China, as you say, it's an export economy. So when they stop exporting all of the, and let's be fair, a lot, there are some very valuable things that come out of China, but a lot of it is trinket junk, you know?
Famously so.
Yeah. And
And
so
another part,
when those aren't coming out, when those aren't going out, people are losing their jobs.
to
But if
be
those things
sure,
aren't, if those things aren't coming into America, who really cares?
well, another thing that
Yeah.
Trump understands in the art of the deal
Mm.
is that it should be a plus sum game, not a
Yes.
zero sum where one side wins and the other side loses, because those kind of deals are not sustainable. They will generally foment political opposition in the country that loses the negotiation. Trump understands that it needs to be a win-win where both sides increase their standing in the context of a trade deal. And, I think we could see that with the UK. They got something. The US got something. And the outlines of this China deal appear to basically resulting in the same thing, where China will catch some breaks, the US will catch some breaks. I think the big question is how much revenue is going to be added when everything is finally in place. Because Trump's dream, and we talked about this before, is to replace the income tax for lower income Americans with tariff revenue. But
Yeah.
that's a long way away.
It's ambitious, and my trust in government in general leads me to think, well, if there's a lot of extra cash sitting around, government will find a way to spend it. We'll be back with Tim Donner after this short break. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.